welcome, namaste. Very happy to be here with all of you, and I very much appreciate the partnership with beYogi. I'm a member of beYogi, appreciate their services generally, as well as their larger resources that they provide to us in the yoga community, particularly those of us on the teaching path. Very happy to participate in their webinar program, and very happy to be here now with you on this really important topic of breath and movement. So I'm going to start to just dive right into it. We have just about, well, the hour that we have together here today. And so to get at this, I'm going to give you a little bit of an outline for what I will go through with you today, what I will present to you today, and then we'll dive right on into it. So to begin, I'll suggest there's a bit of an elephant in the middle of the room. Generally, we talk about things like breath and movement, in part because we've been breathing our entire lives and moving our entire lives. And some would say, well, what's the big deal? And I'll suggest, well, we can get really deeply into this. We will in this session, the refined movement of our body with the movements of the breath, starting with the very simple ways we move while simply sitting in a relatively still position, yet no less with some movement. We'll start there with refined appreciation and refined exploration of just what is happening in our breathing while simply sitting. And with that, we'll tap a little bit into Patanjali's ideas about this, as well as more recent ideas about this. Then we'll shift a little bit more towards greater movements, and then gradually greater and greater movements, looking at in particular, how we move into a posture, an asana, and then once in that asana, so transitioning in, and then once in, then what we are doing with breath, and then transitioning out. And that, again, might sound terribly simple, and hopefully, well, ideally with practice, it becomes simpler. But along the way, we want to appreciate just what is happening with breath and energetic action within us, and how that relates to finding stability and ease. Sthira Sukham from Patanjali, you might recall. Steadiness and ease in our overall practice. We'll also look at more grand kinds of movements, transitions, for example, in Surya Namaskaras and sun salutations, and explore the ideal or the optimal phase of breath with different types of movements. And so with that, I want to, again, start to dive right in by inviting you to come into a comfortable cross-leg sitting position. You might choose to sit in a chair. You might choose to sit up on props, on a block, on a folded blanket, whatever it is that allows you to sit as comfortably tall as you can, and ideally with your weight to the front of your sitting bones, your ischial tuberosities. So you might play here almost like with a cat-cow movement for a moment, moving your pelvis forward and back, sort of rolling, rocking a little on your sitting bones, and little by little, finding where your weight is more to the front of your sitting bones. This giving us, I'll suggest, a relatively level or neutral pelvis, which then allows our spine to most naturally arise from it, giving us the ideal position of the spine, its natural form that allows the breath to flow most naturally. And so we're going to start in a moment with focusing on natural breathing, but then we'll contrast that with what I'll refer to as not natural breathing, but cultivated breathing, and specifically yogic cultivated breathing, initially with just Ujjayi pranayama. So here's where I want to pause a little bit with our actions, if you will, while sitting tall and preparing for everything. So I want to back up a little bit to that Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, which is where we first come to a description in the yoga literature of the idea of there being 4 moments of breath, or 4 elements, 4 phases of movement. Be careful with the word movement here, but 4 phases of movement of breath. And so the first of those is we would think of or refer to as inhalation. The ancients called this puraka, this amazing receiving of this amazing energy from the universe, from the divine. Puraka, this energy flows into us with inhalations. So there's an inhale. And then on the other side of that, there's what we would call an exhalation, exhale. And the ancients call this Richaka, Patanjali, Richaka. Richaka, we say, yes, exhalation, and this does refer to the breath flowing out, but that term probably sounds a lot like recharging. And indeed, the etymological origins of the word in ancient languages, Proto-Indo-European languages, has it that this is a recharging of the body that is occurring. And thus, as the breath flows out, that awakening life force energy of the breath, does it flow out? That has to do a lot with what we are doing actively with breath. But the idea is that as the breath is flowing out, that energy, that revitalizing energy, is diffusing through us. Some would say potentially to the tips of our toes. And again, I'll suggest that involves matters of consciousness, but also action in our bodies that allows the breath to flow more freely and fully all through us. Patanjali continues, 2 other phases or moments of breath. So first, we draw breath in, puraka, inhalation, and before the breath flows out, something happens, maybe, and it's called kumbhaka in the ancient literature, a Sanskrit term. You can simply think of it as, relate to it ideally as a moment of suspension, a moment of almost sort of nothingness. We draw the breath in, and before the breath flows out, there's this moment filled with breath. There's this moment of just nothing, of suspension. And then the breath flows out. And empty a breath before the breath flows back in, another such pause or suspension, again called kumbhaka. Those 2 kumbhakas have their own names. There's antara kumbhaka, filled with breath. There's vayu kumbhaka, empty a breath. The tendency across all humanity, and I will suggest this has to do primarily with stress, is to cut off those pauses. That we tend, breathing in, to begin an exhalation before we've filled our lungs, and we often cut off the pause filled with breath, and the same exhaling. Before we've fully completed the exhalation, we're already inhaling. And indeed, we consider that the natural average breath capacity being about 5 liters of breath, yet the average actual breath is about 1 liter. We're tending to breathe in this very shallow range when we have this much greater capacity, and amidst that much shorter range, cutting off those pauses that are precious. They're precious sources and signs of being present and being calm. Now, as we're moving along in a postural practice, whether it is a flowish practice, a chair yoga practice, or any other type of physical yoga, hatha yoga, from Ashtanga Vinyasa to Svarupa or whatever else it happens to be, we are always moving in some way. And ideally, we're moving with the phases of breath in the ways that those favor the natural ways that our body moves and opens and also stabilizes. So we're going to begin to explore this now more directly and look to appreciate the movement where we're consciously moving the breath with the inhalations, and the movement and the sensations that are occurring along the way with the exhalations, as well as the natural pauses. Now, when we're doing most postural practices, I'll suggest that the postures themselves, this isn't a flowing practice. And indeed, even if you're doing chair yoga, you initially flow into the chair. You sit into the chair, and you will also be creating movements that are flowish. The poses themselves, where we hold a pose, where we're actually in the pose, asana, those occur primarily in those natural pauses. You might imagine upward facing dog pose in a sun salutation. You're inhaling, transitioning into the up dog. Where does up dog appear? In the natural pause filled with breath. And then we're exhaling, and with the exhalation, that signals the transition, and we're moving with the breath to downward facing dog pose in a sun salutation, and we arrive there. Now, you might be continuing to move from there, but otherwise, if you were to be there for just that moment, empty a breath, down dog appears where? In the natural pause. So put differently, the pauses, the poses themselves appear in the pauses themselves, which is a very interesting thing if we are cutting off the pauses. So now think for a moment of inhaling into upward facing dog pose, but never really having that pause, or exhaling down into chaturanga, but never having that pause. What tends to happen is that in cutting off the pauses, we also tend to cut off or short circuit the poses which appear in the natural pauses. This is a theme that we will return to throughout our time together, our brief time that we have together here now. So now diving more in to feeling and doing this while simply sitting to start, before we start to connect what we do while sitting and better appreciating the breath to relating the breath to movement in larger postural forms, are very simple ones like cat-cows, before we do grander kinds of movements. And in all of this, I will try to underline how as teachers, and I have a sense that most of you are teachers, that how as teachers we might best guide our students in relationship to their breathing. And so again, sitting as comfortably tall as you can. And you might, for a moment, play with what I call slumpasana, just to feel what that is about for you. And then try to, again, bring your weight to the front of your sitting bones. And consider sitting up on something, folded blanket, block, whatever it is. And then lift up your shoulders a little bit and bring them back a little bit. And then let them relax down your back without forcing them there. And then move your head forward and back a few times to find where it feels to you like your head is kind of floating effortlessly as can be on top of your spine. And then you might let your eyes rest lightly closed, or focus your gaze on something that's not moving, or open yourself to more of a diffuse gaze and kind of letting it all in. Whatever it works for you to be more focused inwardly, even with your eyes perhaps open. Now, just notice how you're breathing, or rather notice the breathing that's happening right now with you. That is, you are breathing without trying to breathe in any way at all. Just notice it. Notice your breathing. Try as best you can to breathe just through your nose. If that's difficult, share the breathing with your mouth. If you're congested, breathe through your mouth. But ideally, we breathe through the nose, and it's a far superior filtering system for lots of reasons I won't go into here. I go into in-depth in places like online pranayama courses. So here now, as you're simply breathing and sensing the breath and sensing the natural ways that your body is moving, just for a moment, with your eyes perhaps resting lightly closed, I would suggest, as a teacher, I place my hand in front of my face in the class and suggest, open your mouth and breathe like you're trying to fog up a mirror or a glass. Like, with that quality of audibility, I want to encourage my students to create that sound and sensation with both the inhalations and exhalations for a few cycles of breath to get the sensation of the breath in the throat. And that sound, like a whisper when breathing through the trees or the sea at the seashore, using whatever metaphors might work for you, then try to maintain that sound and sensation with your mouth closed. Breathing just through your nose, we come to then ujjayi, or uplifting or victorious breathing, basic yogic breathing through your nose. And then now, as you stay with it, little by little, begin to explore cultivating the breath to be more balanced, what we can call, what the ancients or medieval yogis called shamavritti, equal fluctuation breath. So your inhalations and exhalations are more like in every way, in the pace of the breath, in the duration of the breath, in the texture of the breath. And as you're now more aware of your breathing, notice how you can't but affect it. It's an interesting thing. We breathe without thinking about it. We breathe when we sleep. We breathe all day long without thinking about it. But the moment we think about it, the moment our mind comes into our breathing, it affects our breathing. So we begin to more consciously, deliberately affect it by choice. So now, as you're with the breath, just for a few more cycles of breath, notice the natural ways your body moves with the breath. So as you're drawing breath in, just notice the natural ways that your rib cage spreads apart. Notice the natural ways that your spine extends taller, that you grow taller. And notice when filled with breath, before that breath flows out, that little moment of nothing, of suspension. And then the breath is flowing out, and feel what's happening. Notice the movements in your body that are happening with the flow of the breath. And there's a tendency for us to draw more towards center. As the breath is flowing out, you might find, really pressing the breath out, how your belly engages. And you might find with those exhalations, especially as your belly naturally engages, a more natural active rooting down through your sitting bones. Now, exploring this all a little more, as you're drawing the breath in, you might imagine a jug filling with water, how it would fill, or glass, how it would fill out evenly, not just the front or the back of it, and so, or the sides of it. And so here, as you're consciously bringing the breath in, try to spread evenly out through your ribs, your side ribs spreading, your back ribs spreading. And as you're drawing the breath fully in, drawing taller yet in the natural ways that breath suggests or creates, go with that. Growing taller yet, your chest expanding, your upper back expanding. Try to now maintain that spaciousness as the breath is flowing out. And as you ease that breath out slowly and completely, again, feel your belly engaging and go with that a little without bearing down in your belly. Try to maintain the light, easy engagement of your abdominal core that happens as a result of complete exhalations. Try to maintain that engagement as you draw breath in, giving more support to drawing energy up to your body. Every breath in, taller and more spacious. Try to maintain that spaciousness as the breath is flowing out, all the way out with that engagement of your belly and more of a connection of your sitting bones, getting more of a sense of being grounded with practice, lifting that space between your sitting bones, cultivating mula bandha. And as you stay with this now, we come to revisiting clearly those 4 phases. So now with those inhalations happening consciously, slow, steady breath in, filling your lungs, expanding outwards and upwards, every breath out, easing it out, your belly engaging. And so we want to try, ideally, to maintain just this rhythm of breath, almost like an unchanging metronome all through our practices in such a way that all the asanas that we're creating, transitioning into them, refinements within them, and transitioning out of them are happening around and through the integrity of this breathing, of this quality of breathing, of steady inhalation, steady exhalation, and the natural pauses in between them. Now, I want to stay with this, excuse me, simple sitting breathing practice for a few more cycles of breath. And with this, I do encourage you now to let your eyes rest slightly closed if they're not already, to really, really tune in and get, let's call it kind of nerdy, granular about this now. Now, on the next several cycles of breath, initiating the inhalation, start to tune into the very, very, very slightest, most subtle, nuanced movements and overall sensations that are happening for you as you're drawing the breath in and consciously exploring that shared spreading of the breath through your body outwards and drawing upwards as you're fully filling your lungs in. Notice all along the way the sensations that are occurring. Notice the natural pause filled with breath, where you might sense more of a sense of openness, of clarity. And as the breath is flowing out, again, try to maintain the spaciousness, the quality of the inhalation, feeding into the exhalation with that. And all the breath flowing, notice all along the way what's happening as you're easing that breath out and the gradual way that your belly engages. And again, try to maintain that engagement such that the quality of the exhalation feeds into the inhalation. Breath by breath, these relationships of inhalation, natural pause, exhalation, natural pause, giving us the foundational thread of our practice. Now, as you stay with that steady Ujjayi breathing, I invite you to just for a moment come forward onto all fours. And as you arrive on all fours, you might extend one leg back behind you like this, pressing to that heel, simply to stretch out to your knees and ankles and hips just for a moment to get that pressure away from there. And then if it's okay with your knees, I invite you to sit back onto your heels for a moment, simply sitting to start with. And here we'll start to explore a grander movement. And that's going to be the simple movement of the arms up overhead into a posture. If we were standing, and we will soon, it would be called Urdhva Hastasana, or upward arms pose. And it's this simple movement of drawing the arms overhead, either shoulder distance apart or all the way with palms together. And so now coming back to, and again, consider sitting up on stacks of blocks, bolsters, in a chair, whatever it takes for you to sit up as comfortably tall as you can in this basic Vajrasana or thunderbolt position. And with your shoulders relaxed down your back, neutral pelvis, coming back to those natural shapes here, with your arms down by your sides, turn your palms out. And then turn your palms in. If you turn them in a lot and try to reach your arms overhead, it won't work very well. We get stuck for lots of reasons I won't explain right now. But if you release your arms down and turn your palms out and reach your arms overhead, it happens more naturally. That is, the arms won't usually draw overhead. I won't go into the anatomy details of that here and now unless, well, I won't. So now, reestablishing your sitting bones, turning the palms out. Draw a deep breath in here. As you're exhaling, feel your belly engage and more actively root down to your sitting bones as you do. Keeping that rootedness as you're inhaling, slowly draw your arms outwards and upwards. And as you exhale, radiate it out. Go taller through your spine as you draw your palms back down, perhaps to your heart. Now, let's explore something radically different. opposite breathing. So generally, we would inhale our arms overhead. In a sun salutation, we'll come to those soon, we would, as we exhale, fold forward and down with arms either swan diving or palms through center or whatever way that you move. We are exhaling and folding forward and down. Imagine doing that with the opposite. Let's explore that just for a moment. Here, with your arms down by your sides, draw a deep breath in. Exhale all that breath out. Now take another deep breath in. Exhaling, draw your arms overhead. Inhaling, release your arms back down. Let's go back to the original way again. That is, exhale the breath out, palms out. Notice the difference is the point here. Inhaling, reach your arms outwards and upwards. An expansive movement. Exhaling, draw back down around to center. Drawing back to center with the exhalation. Contrast that with, again, doing it with the opposite. Inhale deeply. Exhale and draw your arms out and up overhead. And you'll probably find, as you continue to reach your arms overhead, how there's a tendency of the centering, drawing down energy of an exhalation, inhibiting the movement of the arms overhead. And similarly, as we release back down with an inhalation, it doesn't give us that quality of grounding, of establishment of foundation that we want to get in every phase of breath. And it's natural to occur with the exhalations if we're moving with the phases of breath as suggested in the natural ways that breath relates to movement, as I'm suggesting to you right here and now. So backing up from that a little bit, a sort of general statement that we can make about breath and movement is that generally speaking, we create expansive movements on inhalations. And we also, generally speaking, create more space, openness in the anterior front parts of the body. We inhale to open here, we exhale and we move into it. And it's the same as we'll see here now, exploring with cat-cows. So on all fours, with your knees under your hips, your wrists under your shoulders, about shoulder distance apart. Tend your wrists, have your wrists a little ahead of your shoulders. You might, for a moment, with straight arms, sink your chest towards your mat, then press away, rounding your upper back, and do that a few times to find where you're to come then to the center of those positions, and suspended there, pull your shoulder blades down against your back ribs with your neck in its natural form. Now, here we are again. Come back to the breath, to ujjayi breathing. And so with no movement initially, let me just pause on that for just a moment. I said no movement. There is no such thing as no movement. This is an important parenthetical statement that's going to be a thread through all of what we're exploring here. We are always moving. Even in an Iyengar class, very focused on sort of static holding of postures for a long time. People say, oh, I'm not moving, or try not to move. We're always moving. Well, let's hope so. Our heart is beating, that's movement. Circulatory system, neurological, we are moving. And our mind tends to move, and that can be a problem, of course. Lots of activity in our mind, but the point is that we are always moving. In yoga, we move consciously, and we move deliberately, and we move with the breath. So again, coming back to all fours, suspended in your shoulder girdle with your shoulder blades rooted down against your back ribs. Now we begin to relate those phases of breath to movement. So again, expanding the front body with an inhalation, that suggests as we rotate our pelvis forward, the sitting bones lifting, the belly starting to drop, we pull the chest forward, we're expanding the front body a little bit. As we exhale and we arch, we're expanding the back body a lot in this cat form. Inhaling, rotating the pelvis forward. Natural pause filled with breath is where the cow appears. Exhaling, we arch to the spine, and all the breath out, we pull the belly in perhaps a bit more, and the cat appears in the natural pause, empty of breath. Now, just for a moment, please come back to sitting onto your heels so I can try to inspire or motivate a more refined approach to this. That is not so profound, but let's just say, in those movements of simple cat-cows, and we're going to relate this to everything else, including the advanced asana at some point. We will look at these things. So appreciate the breath in that kind of, again, nerdy, granular way from the very, very, very first moment that an inhalation starts to happen, starts to arise, that you start to consciously create it. From the very initial moment of that happening, of that sensation of, I'm inhaling, pay attention. And pay attention throughout that phase of breath with the movements that you're consciously creating with that phase of breath. And I'll come back later to how this relates also to simple sitting. We are, again, moving always with breath, even as we might be moving into stillness. And so all along the way, I encourage you to reflect, to feel, more importantly, what is happening through the phase of breath and movement. And then natural pause filled with breath. We start, as we exhale, to create a different movement. Notice at a very granular level what is happening both with the breath itself, keeping it smooth, steady, balanced as can be. Again, that texture of the breath, the energy of the breath, as similar as can be with the inhalations and exhalations. And one last point on this. Notice the quality of the transition of the breath into and out of those pauses. We have a tendency, all of us, for the breath to rush in and out of those natural pauses. Try to explore making those transitions as sort of seamless as can be. We breathe into the pause, we breathe out of the pause, and the pace, the rate, the duration, the texture of the breath unchanged when it's moving. So coming back to all fours with that perhaps more refined idea, one last point on that is by virtue of moving more slowly, you can move, I'll suggest, more consciously. And I highly encourage exploring a really slow practice, especially if you want a more power practice. Counterintuitive as that may sound, you'll have a more power practice by moving slowly. You might just contrast a quick movement to chaturanga in contrast to moving very slowly to chaturanga, and ask yourself which of those would create more strength. Okay, on all fours, again, fingers spreading, knuckles grounding, shoulder blades down against your back ribs. Now, just a few more cycles with slow motions and very conscious of what's happening for you along the way. In these simple movements of cat and cow, a sense of all the while exploring, stretching the breath, deepening the inhalations and exhalations while keeping them relatively balanced in their pace and their duration, and appreciating the sensations that happen along through your body, especially through your spinal column, along your spinal column as you make these simple movements. As you next exhale, bring your toes together, your knees apart, wide apart, so it's easier on your knees and your lower back, and come into an extended child's pose. You might cross your forearms like this for a headrest just for a moment here. And let everything settle, except keep the breath flowing steadily and spaciously. So again, the breath starts to become the thread, the sutra through the entire practice, as unchanging as can be all through your practice. Now, please come back to sitting up onto your heels, to all fours, curl your toes under, lift your hips up and back to downward facing dog pose. And then, unconcerned about phase of breath, walk forward to the front of your mat. And from there, bend your knees deeply, inhaling, come up high to your fingertips, and exhale your hands to your hips, and then press up to standing. One of the easier ways to make it to standing. Now, standing. In mountain pose, Tadasana mountain pose, actively grounding down through your legs to your feet. Your feet might be hip distance apart, a la Iyengar. They might be together, a la flowish Ashtanga Vinyasa and other methods. And whichever allows you to feel more stable and balanced in your standing. Actively grounding down through your legs to your feet and standing tall with your arms down at your sides. Come right back to Ujjayi breathing. Inhalation, natural pause. Exhalation, natural pause. And notice the movements here, similar to what we had while sitting, but now with the legs involved. Explore as you're exhaling and you feel your belly engaging and a sense of energy drawing more to center. With those exhalations, you might also explore a sense of more actively grounding down and connecting to your feet to the earth. And maintaining that groundedness as the breath is drawing in, you might get more of a sense of lifting all through your joints, up through your legs, through your hips, your knees, to your hips. It's also, well, it's law of resultant force, Newton's third law of motion. For every action, equal and opposite reaction. As we exhale, we get that centering, that greater grounding. It causes greater elongation up through our body. We're moving with breath, even when we don't think about it. So now exhaling the breath out, getting more grounded, taller yet. Turn your palms out. And inhaling, draw your arms outwards and upwards. And as you exhale, radiate out, grow taller yet as you draw your palms back around to your heart. or to your sides. Please don't fall. Staying with the breath here. And now just for a moment with your hands on your hips, bend your knees deeply. Move your pelvis forward and back a few times to find where it feels like your spine is drawing naturally from your pelvis. And from there, release your arms down and turn your palms up for chair pose. Inhaling, reach your arms overhead. Now, as you exhale, press out of this to standing mountain pose, samastihi, perhaps your palms to your heart. Draw a deep breath in here. Exhale the breath out all the way. Now, let the inhalation initiate movement, bending your knees while reaching your arms down, then sweeping them overhead. I'll suggest this movement to circulate synovial fluid in your shoulder joint. And exhale simply back to standing, the circular movement of the arms, that is, rather than just arms straight up. Let's do that again. So, but with opposite phase of breath. Just again, I'll suggest a disconnect with breath by doing it in the opposite way. So exhale the breath out all the way. Now draw a deep breath in, and while exhaling, find chair pose and inhale back to center. I'll suggest, it depends on, you might not feel the same way. For me, it just feels entirely weird to do it with that opposite face. Let's explore that a little bit further though. That is, exhale to chair pose, inhaling, fold forward and down. If you were continuing with the sun salutation, that would have you exhale, draw your chest forward, and what? Inhale to chaturanga. And that would have you exhaling into upward facing dog pose. I'm playing with you only a little bit with this, especially if you are deeply already convinced or find the value of breathing in the ways we ordinarily breathe with these movements. So this is to underline again that with the natural effects of the breath in the body, it suggests and it supports expansive movements with inhalations, contractive movements with exhalations, and generally speaking, with those inhalations, that expansive movement in the front body. And this applies in a variety of different postures, including wheel pose, Urdhva Dhanurasana, where we're on our back with our hands down, and we wait to empty our lungs, all the breath out, empty a breath. With an inhalation, we expand the front body, rising up into the wheel. And it's going to be that way with many other poses as we explore moving along here. Okay, going a little bit further with this. So again, this is to suggest that there's a natural way that the breath phases relate to movement in and out of postures. Let's go a bit further with this to look at some standing postures. Just again, staying right with it with our limited amount of time that we have here. So separating your feet about the length of one of your legs plus one of your feet, Masa Menos. Preparing for warrior two pose. Lift the ball of your right foot to spin on the heel, to turn that foot out 90 degrees. Try to get your hips level, your pelvis neutral. And with your arms out level with the floor, your shoulder blades down against your back ribs, staying with the breath. Now, I generally would guide looking over your front fingertips. Then the idea is we're going to exhale into the asanas. By virtue of inhaling, we create more space in our body through our joints, such that we have greater space as we're making a transition into a posture like warrior two. And so now, if you were to exhale out of it, one certainly could exhale out of it, but generally speaking, our exits out of asanas, generally speaking, are expansive movements, or movements where we want to be able to certainly be elongating to the spinal column in making that movement, and it suggests an inhalation and drawing out of the posture. We exhale slowly into the posture, we inhale coming out of the posture, and then what happens though when we hold the posture? Virabhadrasana 2, warrior two pose. I want to again suggest that there is always movement, even when moving into stillness. And that in every breath is an opportunity for refinement. And to me, this suggests also allowing conscious movement within a posture. Even when you're moving into a posture like warrior two, you come to a certain place. We'll call this the practice of playing the edge, originated by Joel Kramer, popularized by Eric Schiffman, myself, and many others. Eric was my first teacher, Joel, a dear friend. The idea is that even in the relative stillness of the posture, we're constantly refining. We're constantly moving into stillness, and with the breath. So even with the appearance of someone else looking at you, there might not be much, if any, movement they can see. The idea is that in every inhalation, we're backing off a little. Every exhalation, we're going a little further in. Every breath, we're finding ways to refine, and that refinement is maximized where as we inhale, we back a little off from where we can go based on what's happening in our tissues. And as we exhale, we go perhaps a little further. Please come out of the posture if you're still in it. Completely unconcerned with how far we go, but rather interested in how we go. Looking more to transition in to, and then transitions or refinement within, and then the practice of breathing out of a posture. Let's just for a moment consider triangle pose, Utthita Trikonasana. And so with the feet positioned about the length of one leg, longer stance for Iyengar folks, shorter stance for Ashtanga Vinyasa folks, but let's just say an average-ish triangle is about here, one leg length between your feet. Now with your arms out level, I would suggest look over your back fingers. Unless you have neck issues, look forward or over the front fingers. Then breathing, as you're breathing deeply in, pressing into your feet, shifting your hips back. Now we want to get more space through the body, through the spine especially. Every exhalation, renewing that grounding that happens and renewing that engagement in our abdominal core to support the center of our, well, to support our lower back, especially as we lengthen out, elongate out away from center of gravity, and there's a lot more force through the lower back. We want to maintain that elongation of the spine. We want to create and maintain that elongation of the spine. So here we are again, triangle pose. I shift my hips back while actively grounding through my feet. And as I'm inhaling, I elongate. I go as far as I can with elongation of my spine on the inhalation phase before releasing my hand down as I exhale. And now I'm here breathing. I'm not generally looking at a camera, but perhaps looking up. Neck issues, look forward or drop your head down. Lots of options with the hands, of course. We won't go into any of these details about asana, just focus on the breath for the most part. Now here we are. In triangle pose, holding the pose, feel the breath. And here we are again with every inhalation, expansive movements, especially greater elongation of the spine as you ground through your legs, through your feet, the awakenings of pillars of the foundation of the posture from those foundations through your feet, through your legs. Every breath in, greater elongation through the spine. What happens with exhalation? Consolidation, integration, drawing more to center. Every breath out, renewing that connection through our belly to our spine, but also renewing through those exhalations, that greater grounding down through our legs and feet. So in every cycle of breath, a sense of refinement. And indeed, you might, as you inhale, be backing a little off from where you can go, even if there's no appearance of that. Every exhalation, perhaps going further into it, perhaps your hand coming farther down, for instance. Then we come to the next phase of the practice, which is getting out of the asana. So here we are in triangle pose, and both feet rooting down. Before we start to rise up, I want to suggest absolutely greater energy down that back leg, greater anchor in there. And while maintaining that greater routine, exhaling through your belly engaged. Keep it engaged to support your lower back more, as with an inhalation, you rise back up. Perhaps turn your feet to parallel and up to center for a moment. So a simple idea there of how we move with breath, coming into a posture, coming out of a posture. Let's look at another standing pose, and that would be revolved triangle pose. And so if you were standing in this way, the front of your mat, and you stepped one of your feet back about a meter and turn that foot in about 45 degrees, and you try to square your hips to the front of your mat, perhaps a wider stance to make it easier to get that back hip forward. Perhaps don't turn that foot in so far to help get that back hip forward. So we're looking to square the hips to the front of the mat. And then with your reaching your left arm up into the sky, actively grounding down to your feet. Let's come back to the breath. Just here with hands on hips. Inhaling, reach up. Why on the inhalation? To contribute in the natural way that inhalations give us greater elongation. Maintain that elongation. We inhale, reaching up. Exhaling, we reach and release our hand down. Now I want to suggest we could stretch that inhalation in this way. As I inhale and reach up, it might be simultaneously inhaling, reaching up and forward, doing two actions with that same phase of inhalation. So you might do multiple cycles of breath for more beginner level class, or with practice, inhaling, I both reach up and hinge from my pelvis to reach forward. What am I attempting to do? Well, staying grounded, the exhalation giving me more of that rooting. I inhale and elongate. And as I exhale, release my hand down. Combine me to a block on the inside or eventually the palm to the outside. And then I begin to explore, breathing continuously, rotating my torso open. Inhaling, I might back off a little bit from the twist. Exhale, I twist more around. In every cycle of breath, I allow those refinements. Inhaling back a little off the edge, if you will. Exhaling, explore going a little bit more in the ways that you're intending. Now, in coming out of the revolved triangle pose, moving with the breath. So again, the idea is as you exhale, feel your belly engage. Be more connected down to your legs, to your feet. Then rooting to your feet as you inhale, windmill up perhaps if you were switching to the other side in this Ashtanga Vinyasa method or any other way. We would inhale up, lengthening out. We release down into the posture, moving little by little with the exhalation into that form. Subsequent inhalation, more elongation, more lengthening. See, we're coming up to about 8 more minutes with you here. So let's look at a couple of other postures that are close to the floor. And so I already mentioned bridge or wheel a little bit ago. So if we're sitting, lying down rather, supine, with the feet in by the hips, about hip distance apart. We could easily spend 5 hours in this webinar and still kind of scratch the surface. But here we are. So with your arms down by the sides, first and foremost, relax. The primary source of moving into postures with stability and ease, steadiness and ease, and to have the most expansive expression of that posture is to move from a place of calm. So I like to suggest taking several breaths in positions like this to simply calm down, and amidst that, to renew the rhythmic, steady flow of the breath. Inhalations, natural pause. Exhalations, natural pause. And now we come to a different kind of connection of breath and movement. So lying down on your back with I'll suggest your left palm on your heart and your right palm on your belly. If you put your right palm on your heart, you might feel you're about to pledge allegiance to your national flag. So I almost always say left palm heart, right palm belly. Now, just for a moment, let your knees rest together and tune in to breath, your breathing rather, and the movement that's happening naturally through your torso, your belly, your chest with the flow of the breath. Take several cycles of breath here. And just appreciate again how with inhalations, there's greater space. Your side and back ribs spreading, your chest spreading, your collarbone spreading apart. And then notice with the exhalations how that kind of all lets go, if you will. Really pressing the breath out, feel how it causes your belly to engage. Really press that breath out and notice how it causes your belly to engage and how that causes the lower back to press down more into your mat. Then notice how as you inhale, that kind of lets go. Your lower back comes more to its natural curve. Your side and back ribs spread, your chest expands. And then again, going with the exhalation, empty a breath, the lower back presses down. Also with that, notice how your tailbone, coccyx, tends to lift a little bit. And that movement of the pelvis is what we want to initiate the transition into back bend. The point of that being that we're looking to move with the breath and use it to help decompress in the lower back on the path towards a posture or postures that could compress and do indeed compress in the lower back, bridges, wheels, and most other back bends. So now, with the arms down by your side, draw one more deep breath in here. Wait for that completion of the exhalation, empty a breath, tailbone curling with that. Let that signal the lifting of your hips as you're inhaling up and up and up. Also just reach your arms overhead on this first bridge, lift your heels up really high, and exhaling, slowly release your spine down, one precious vertebra at a time, like a string of pearls. Once, as you do that, release your arms back down by your sides. And once all the way down, let your heels release back down and your knees rest together. Doing that again. Here again, deep, full breath in, chest expanding. Slowly releasing the breath out, keeping your chest spacious, empty a breath, tailbone curls, inhaling, lift your hips up and up and up. This time, keep your arms down by your sides and either bend your elbows to ground them in this way, or if it's available, interlace your fingers under your back. Really actively going down to your feet to send your hips up higher. If there's too much pressure in your lower back or knees, either don't lift so high or crawl your toes forward. Now here we are. We arrived into this form with an inhalation. We stay to exhale. Now we come to refinement. In every breath, play with backing off a little bit from the height of your hips, from how deep the back bend is, to get more space through your spine with those inhalations, more expansion across your chest. And as you're exhaling, explore rooting to your feet, thinning your hips perhaps up higher into the sky. A sense of pressing the lower tips of your shoulder blades up into your chest. Every breath in, greater spaciousness. Now preparing to come out of the posture, inhaling, lift your heels, reach your arms overhead, and very slow. And it's about getting traction in the spine, and very slowly release your spine down one precious vertebra at a time, coming all the way down. Those same principles of movement to breath, with breath applied in wheel, in bow, in camel, and in other back bending postures. Let's look at, again, sort of jumping around a little bit here. Let's come to, after a back bend, a simple twist. So if you're sitting onto your heels, again, like this, just for a moment, slide off the side of them and separate your knees apart. Look, setting up for Bharad Vajrasana, or simple noose pose. This is Bharad Vajrasana A form, and we'll, in a moment, look to twist in this way. Some of you might have Bharad Vajrasana B practices, which is a far more complex posture, but if you'd like to try this, you could explore this. But we're going to back way up and start from center. Whether you're doing A form or the B form I just quickly showed you. Now, come back to the breath. Yes, your left sitting bone is probably off your mat. There's a slight tilt in the pelvis. Try to root that bone down, sit bone down, even though it probably won't touch the floor. Grounding, come back to breath. Every inhale, go taller. With that greater elongation, greater space between your vertebra, less pressure on your intervertebral discs and nerves. It's the optimal positioning from which to create other movements, such as twisting, back bending, or forward bending, or lateral arching. So, basic idea. Inhale, elongation. Exhale, rotation to the side, turning to the right in this case. Every inhale, back off the twist. How much? Just a little. So I'm moving along in this transition into the pose, and I find a place I go, aha, I feel it. And I go a little further, and I say, too far, or it's as far as I can go. So now what do? As I inhale, I back off, but stay in the zone between the aha and the playing the edge. I inhale, back off, and what else is happening? I'm getting taller, creating more space. It creates the opportunity to go farther around on the subsequent exhalation, going farther in this rotation. Coming back around to center, swiveling to extend both legs out in front of you, grounding to your sitting bones in Dandasana staff pose. With your arms, your hands out along the sides of your legs, pull, not to pull down, but to pull up, to pull your pubis down, your sternum up, and your shoulder blades down your back. So use that clasp, it might be with a strap or holding your toes, to do the same thing, whether you're holding with the strap, your toes, or along the sides of your legs. Pull as you inhale to elongate. Every exhalation in Dandasana, the belly engaged in more active rooting of your sitting bones. Try to create that lift of Mula Bandha between your sit bones to get greater elongation up to your spine, more energy up to your spine. With every breath in, taller yet, and every breath out, I explore rotating my pelvis more forward. Here comes another inhale. Oh, empty a breath, natural pause. Inhalation, restore elongation. Back off a little bit. Exhalations, explore going perhaps a bit further. Every breath, a little bit of movement. Every breath, even when holding that posture in a yenish class for a long period of time, inhalations back slightly off from where you can go. Exhalations, explore going a little bit further. Now, there's much more that we could be exploring, such as how and with what phases of breath might we create arm balance movements. There are 840,000 asanas. I would love to explore all of them with you. We don't have that much time in the context of a brief, really 50 minutes of engagement time with you here in this webinar. I would love to explore all of that with you, and there are opportunities and places that we can meet to do just that. So with that, and with this, I want to thank you for staying with me here, for this period of time. And I wanted to return you back to Lizzie at beYogi. And again, thank you very much for being a part of this brief exploration of breath and movement.
Oh, thank you, Mark. That was an excellent crash course. And I know there's just so much more But with that, I know there are a few questions that came in that I wanted to just quickly touch on. And one of them was, does Mark offer CEUs? And I wanted to mention that Mark is graciously offering a 20% discount on one of his courses. Mark, do you want to quickly touch on that? And I will put the information in the chat.
Is it the pranayama course?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So pranayama, breathing, here we are. I have an online course, a pranayama course. It's 17 hours of online learning. It combines pre-recorded video lectures going into details about history and philosophies of energy, of breath, of prana and prana values, but also the heart of it is about developing the preparatory practices and the practices themselves of pranayama, and especially how to teach pranayama to our students. That's an online course that opens on April 5th. There are 3 live sessions with me. They're each 2.5 hours in length every week, 2.5 hours of doing pranayama practices together. And thank you for bringing that up, Lizzie, rather, excuse me. Thank you.
We will also be sharing that information along with the recording that will be sent out tomorrow. I haven't seen many questions quite so far. So if anyone does have any questions, you can reply back to my email that will be sent out, and I'll send it to Mark. He also, I'm sure, will be willing to answer any questions that he gets as well. Oh, one just popped in from Anaveta. Excuse me if I mispronounced your name, but she says, hi, are they 4 breaths in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras? I don't know if that made sense.
So Yoga Sutra Patanjali chapter 2, go to the Eightfold Path, starting at Yoga Sutra, 2.27 is asana. So 2.29, I think, is one of those first on pranayama. It's in chapter 2. I think it's right around 2.29. He identifies in Puraka, Rachaka, and the 2 Kumbhakas, Antara and Baya Kumbhaka. By the way, those are also described in my books. I'm going to take a quick little moment to say, quick infomercial here, is that I wrote this book, Teaching Yoga. You probably, if you have it, it looks like that. I wrote it 15 years ago. The new one, second edition, comes out on April 2nd, next week. It's available all over the world, many languages, starting on Tuesday. Teaching Yoga, second edition, a substantial rewrite, including the chapter on breathing.
We'll have to get that information from you, Mark, and put it in the email as well, and we'll share it out to everyone.
Thank
All
you.
righty. Well, thank you so much for being here. That was a really amazing topic, and we hope to have you on again very soon. Again, to everyone who has attended, thank you so much for being here. Look out for the recording tomorrow to rewatch all of this good information, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all so much. Namaste.
All right. Bye-bye.
I'm going to go. Bye-bye. Thank you.